The street was too quiet. A heavy silence hung over the neighborhood, broken only by the faint buzz of the streetlights. Windows were dark, curtains pulled shut, as if everyone inside was waiting for something they could not name. Yet one figure was still outside, moving, watching, writing. Karen, the woman from the HOA. For weeks, people whispered about her. She walked at strange hours with a clipboard tucked under her arm. She leaned close to fences, measured hedges, and scribbled notes no one could see. Some claimed she even slipped into backyards when no one was home. Others said they caught her taking photos through the night. Her camera flashed like a ghost in the dark. But on this night, something new happened. A man named Daniels looked out his window when he heard the click of pins against wood. His eyes narrowed. Across the street, Karen stood at the community board. No meeting had been called. No one had been told. Yet there she was, sliding sheets of paper into place, pressing them flat, one after another. Rules. Not the old rules everyone already hated. These were different. The papers looked strange, written in bold red ink, words sharp and exact. Daniels could not read them from his window, but he felt the wrongness in his bones. His chest tightened. Why was she doing this in secret? The next morning, whispers spread like fire. A few early risers found the papers before Karen could vanish. They pulled one down, unfolded it, and read in disbelief. New restrictions. Harsh, strange, and almost impossible. Rules about when lights could be turned on. Rules about what words could be spoken outside. Rules that made no sense at all. Someone said they felt like warnings. Others said they felt like commands. By evening, the whole neighborhood buzzed with unease. Mothers clutched their children a little tighter. Old men shook their heads, muttering about this, tongues that never should have been disturbed. And yet, Karen smiled at everyone, as if nothing had changed. But Daniels couldn't let it go. He watched her from his window again that night. And there she was, moving through the dark, clipboard in hand, her shadow stretching across the street. She stopped in front of each house, staring at the windows, as if counting. Her lips moved, whispering words no one could hear. Daniel's heart pounded. He had the strange feeling that this was not about lawns, fences, or mailboxes anymore. It was something bigger, something hidden inside the ordinary shape of rules, something that could change not only the neighborhood, but perhaps more. What was Karen planning? And why did it feel like the start of something far larger than anyone could imagine? The night grew heavier. The air seemed to hum, and for the first time, Daniels wondered if their quiet neighborhood had just become the front line of something dangerous, something human, something far from ordinary. And Karen was at the center of it. Karen always believed the neighborhood was her responsibility, not the HOA board, not the neighbors, and certainly not the people who didn't care about rules. No, it was her. She thought only she had the vision to save their community from falling apart. In her mind, the signs were everywhere. A house painted a shade too bright, a trash can left out 10 minutes past pickup, toys scattered in a yard as if it were a playground instead of a home. To others, these things were small. To Karen, they were proof of decay, little cracks that could spread until everything broke. She had warned the HOA before. She had complained in meetings, written emails, even pointed out infractions during block parties. But no one took her seriously. They told her to calm down. They told her the rules were already strict enough. Karen disagreed. If the board refused to act, she would, and unlike them, she wouldn't wait. She started small. Notes slipped under doors, unsigned but sharp, reminding people of the rules they had forgotten. A photo of a neighbor's garden gnome mailed to their own mailbox, circled in red ink, as if it were evidence of a crime. These little warnings thrilled her. She felt powerful. She felt like the only one brave enough to do what was needed. But soon, Small wasn't enough. Karen began drafting her own rules. Late at night, while the street was silent, she sat at her kitchen table with a lamp burning low. Her clipboard rested beside her, filled with sketches and lists. Each rule was harsher than the last. All houses must display white curtains only. No voices outside after 9 p.m. No yard lights brighter than standard issue. She wrote them as if they were law, each one more detailed, more controlling. And in her mind, it all made sense. The stricter the neighborhood became, the safer it would be. The cleaner, the better. Her obsession grew until she would hardly sleep. She roamed the streets at night, whispering the rules under her breath, testing them on the dark air. She memorized every crack in the sidewalk, every untrimmed hedge, every shadow where wrongness might hide. The neighbors noticed, of course. Curtains twitched when she walked past. Mothers pulled children inside when they saw her. Even the dogs barked more at night. But Karen didn't care. She thought of herself as a guardian, misunderstood, but necessary. And then came the rules she posted secretly. That night, when Daniel saw her at the community board, she wasn't just pinning paper. She was sealing her vision into the heart of the neighborhood. The bold red ink, the sharp commands, they weren't suggestions. They were the foundation of what Karen thought would become a new order. She smiled as she worked, pin after pin clicking into the wood. She didn't see Daniels watching. She didn't notice the unease growing around her. To Karen, this was triumph. For the first time, the neighborhood was starting to look like she imagined it. Perfect. Controlled. Hers. But she had no idea that by forcing her rules on others, she was opening a door she could not close. A door that would change everything, not only for her, but for everyone who lived there. Karen's hands shook with excitement as she wrote the newest list. Each word was neat, sharp, and final. In her mind, these were not suggestions, they were commands. She whispered them out loud as her pen scratched the page. No holiday decorations. No cars parked after 9 p.m. No pets over 20 pounds. She paused after each one, imagining the street lined in perfect order. No blinking lights on roofs, no cluttered driveways, no dogs barking at night. A neighborhood as clean and silent as a military base. She could almost see it already. When the list was finished, she carefully typed it out, bold and crisp, then printed a dozen copies. She placed them in a folder, tucked the folder under her arm, and waited until nightfall. At midnight, the streets were still. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Karen stepped out of her house, her shoes clicking softly on the pavement. She clutched her folder tight, like a soldier holding secret orders. She moved quickly, pinning one sheet to the community board, then another on the clubhouse door, then more at the park and along the mailboxes. The pins made sharp snaps as they drove into the wood and metal. Each sound thrilled her. Each sheet made her feel more powerful. By the time she returned home, the neighborhood slept on, unaware that their world had just changed. Karen went to bed with a smile, certain no one would question the rules once they saw them. After all, wasn't she only protecting the community? But morning told a different story. The first person to notice was Mrs. Alvarez, who walked her dog every day before sunrise. She froze in front of the board, staring at the bold red letters. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Finally, she tore one paper down and carried it with her, muttering under her breath. By 7 o'clock, neighbors were gathering. More copies had been found. Some stood, with arms crossed, shaking their heads. Others held the papers in their hands, pointing at the words in disbelief. No holiday decorations? What about Christmas? After 9, no cars? How are we supposed to work late? £20. My golden retriever weighs 60. The crowd grew louder. Murmurs turned into arguments, voices rising through the quiet streets. Kids leaned out of windows to watch. Dogs barked from backyards. The entire neighborhood was buzzing like a hornet's nest. Daniels, still uneasy from what he had seen the night before, pushed his way through the crowd. He scanned the paper, his stomach tightening. This wasn't just strict. It was strange, almost unnatural, like someone was trying to erase all signs of life from the neighborhood. "Who posted this?" a man demanded. "Was there a vote?" another woman snapped. "This isn't legal," someone else shouted. No one answered, but eyes started to shift. People looked toward Karen's house, the only one with curtains drawn tight and no movement inside. Karen herself stayed hidden, peeking through a sliver in her blinds. She saw the neighbors holding the rules, their faces twisted with anger and fear. But instead of regret, she felt pride. To her, their shock meant they had noticed. And once rules were noticed, they had power. The street filled with noise, arguments clashing like storms, and while everyone shouted, one thing became clear to Daniels. The neighborhood was no longer just uneasy. It was divided. And Karen had lit the match. By mid-morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Small groups formed on the sidewalks, papers in hand, voices sharp with confusion. The question circled over and over. Where did these rules come from? Karen finally stepped outside, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. She put on her best smile, the kind she used when pretending everything was fine. "It's official HOA policy," she said smoothly. "You all must have missed the update." Some nodded uncertainly, but others frowned. Daniels crossed his arms, his eyes fixed on her. He remembered the way she had pinned those papers in the middle of the night. "Funny," he said. "I don't recall a vote, and I always attend the meetings." Karen's smile flickered. "The board has the authority. I'm just making sure the community stays safe and in order." Her voice sharpened on the last words, like a knife hidden in sugar. But suspicion spread. Mrs. Alvarez, still holding the sheet she had ripped down, pulled out her phone. "Let's check the meeting notes," she said. Within minutes, she was scrolling through official HOA records, her eyes darting across the screen. "There's nothing here," she announced loudly. "No mention of new rules, no discussions, nothing." The crowd stirred. Murmurs turned to whispers. Eyes shifted back to Karen. A young father holding his toddler shook his head. "So you just made these up?" "That's not how this works," another neighbor added. "You lied," someone else said. Karen's smile vanished. Her grip on the clipboard tightened, her knuckles white. "I didn't lie," she snapped. "I did what the board should have done. You're all too blind to see what this place needs." Her words fell heavy. A silence followed, broken only by the sound of the wind pushing leaves across the pavement. Daniel stepped forward. "These rules were never approved. You posted them in secret. That's not policy, Kay. Aaron, that's control." The neighbors looked between him and Karen. The balance shifted. For the first time, people weren't just annoyed. They were suspicious. Karen's heart raced. She had expected resistance, but not this kind of open challenge. She forced another smile, though it trembled at the edges. "You'll thank me one day," she whispered, but it sounded less like a promise and more like a warning. Behind the crowd, someone tore another copy of the rules off the clubhouse wall and crumpled it in their fist. Others followed, ripping the red-inked papers down one by one. Each tear echoed like thunder in Karen's chest. Her perfect vision was unraveling before her eyes. But deep down, she wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Not ever. And the neighbors could feel it. The fight was only beginning. The torn papers rattled Karen more than she let on. For days, she paced her living room, muttering to herself, clutching her clipboard like it was a weapon. The neighbors didn't understand. They needed rules. Without order, everything would collapse. So Karen decided to push harder. The next morning, she marched door to door with a stack of slips, fake fines she had written up herself. Each one was marked with bold red ink, stamped HOA violation across the top. At the Alvarez house, she taped one to the door, $100 for excessive dog weight. At the Johnsons' home, $50 for late trash removal. At Daniels's driveway, $200 for improper parking. She believed fear would make them obey. If the neighbors thought money was at stake, they would fall in line. But the neighborhood wasn't falling in line. Instead, suspicion grew deeper. People whispered to one another on sidewalks, comparing slips, shaking their heads. "She can't do this," they said. "None of this is real." Still, Karen acted bold, threatening anyone who questioned her. "Ignore the fines and it'll get worse," she warned. "I have the board's full support." Her voice was cold, her eyes burning with false authority. What she didn't know was that someone was watching. One clever neighbor, quiet, careful, and tired of her games, had begun documenting everything. They snapped photos of Karen late at night, posting new rules on the board. They recorded her threats on their phone, every sharp word saved. They even pulled official HOA records to prove her lies, printing them side by side with her fake fines. Piece by piece, the evidence grew into something solid, undeniable. Karen, however, believed she was untouchable. She strutted through the streets, clipboard under her arm, handing out more fines, warning more families. In her mind, she was tightening her grip. But in truth, the harder she squeezed, the more the power slipped through her fingers. At night, she whispered to herself at the window, staring out at the homes around her. "They'll see. They'll understand. I'm saving them." Her reflection in the glass looked back like a stranger, tight-lipped, wide-eyed, and desperate. What she didn't see were the neighbors gathering, whispering to one another, planning. Her plan was cracking. The lies were exposed, and soon Karen would learn she was no longer the hunter in the shadows. She was the one being watched. The community center buzzed with low voices that evening. Every chair was filled, every neighbor present. Papers rustled, feet tapped nervously against the floor. The air was thick with tension. Then the doors opened. Karen stepped inside, clipboard pressed tight against her chest. Her chin lifted high, her steps sharp and confident. She looked at the crowd as if they were soldiers waiting for orders. A faint smile curved her lips. Tonight, she thought, they would finally understand who was in charge. She took her usual seat at the front, adjusting her papers with deliberate care. "Let's begin," she announced, her voice cutting through the room. "We have new policies to review, for the good of the neighborhood." But before she could continue, a voice rang out from the back. "Enough!" Every head turned. The clever neighbor, the one who had been quietly gathering evidence, stood up. In their hands was a thick folder, bulging with papers and photographs. Their face was calm, but their eyes were sharp with fire. Karen frowned. "Excuse me. You're out of order." "No," the neighbor said firmly. "You are." The room went silent. Even the shuffling stopped. The neighbor stepped forward, opening the folder. Pages fluttered like wings. "We know what you've been doing, and we have proof." A photo was held high for all to see. Karen at midnight, pinning her red-inked rules to the community board. Gasps spread through the crowd. Next came the recordings. A phone speaker crackled with Karen's own voice, threatening fines, making up rules, claiming the board's authority. Her tone was sharp, commanding, undeniable. Finally, the fake fines themselves were passed around the room. Red ink, bold words, false charges. Side by side, the real HOA documents told a different story. No votes, no approvals, no authority. "This is who's been behind it all," the neighbor said, their voice steady. "Not the HOA, not the board, just her. Lying, threatening, pretending she had power she never had." The room was still. Karen's smile cracked, her face pale under the harsh lights. She gripped her clipboard so tightly it shook. "That's not," she stammered. "That's not the full story. I was only protecting this neighborhood. Someone had to keep order." But no one was listening. Eyes that once glanced away from her now locked firmly on her, cold and unblinking. The silence pressed against her like a wall. For the first time, Karen felt small, and she realized her control was gone. The silence after the evidence hung heavy in the room. Then, slowly, the HOA board members exchanged looks. Their faces were tight with anger. One of them, Mrs. Lewis, cleared her throat and stood. Her voice was calm but sharp enough to cut the air. "Karen, you not only lied to your neighbors, you tried to abuse power you never had. You embarrassed this board. You embarrassed this community." Karen's jaw clenched. "I was only trying to protect everyone. None of you take your job seriously. Without me, this neighborhood would—" "Enough!" Mrs. Lewis snapped. The firmness of her voice made Karen flinch. "You don't make the rules here. The board does. And the people you try to control, they're the ones who will decide what happens next." The neighbors stirred, their voices low but growing stronger. "Vote," someone whispered. Then louder, "Vote!" The chant spread until the whole room joined in, their voices echoing against the walls. Karen's eyes darted from face to face. Neighbors she had once bullied, now glaring back at her with anger, relief, and even a touch of satisfaction. The board moved quickly. A motion was called, seconded, and placed before the community. Should Karen be removed from all HOA involvement? Hands went up across the room, one after another, arms lifted high until it looked like a sea of rejection. Karen's breath caught in her throat. She gripped her clipboard tighter, as if it could shield her. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "Without me, you'll regret it. You'll see." But her words no longer carried weight. Daniels, seated near the front, leaned back with a faint smile. He had waited for this moment. The neighborhood had finally turned, not because of fear, but because of truth. The board counted, the decision clear before the final number was even spoken. Karen had lost. Completely. Her clipboard slipped from her fingers. LA, landing on the floor with a dull thud. For the first time, she had no rules left to hide behind. The very people she tried to control had taken her power away. And there was no going back. The vote ended with no doubt left. Karen was done. The board announced it clearly. She was stripped of any role, any influence, any authority in the HOA. The words echoed through the room like a hammer striking steel. Karen stood frozen, her face pale, her hands trembling at her sides. She had walked into the meeting expecting control, expecting obedience. Instead, she stood stripped of everything, exposed before the very people she once tried to command. The neighbors didn't shout. They didn't argue. They didn't even fear her anymore. What replaced the fear was worse. Laughter. Someone in the back chuckled at the memory of her pet weight rule. Another neighbor smirked about the fake fines. Soon the room buzzed with quiet amusement, as if her grand plan had turned into nothing more than a bad joke. Karen's stomach twisted. Once, she had imagined herself as the guardian of order. Now, she was the punchline of the neighborhood. Every whispered laugh, every sideways glance, cut deeper than any words. When she finally walked out of the meeting hall, all eyes followed. Not with respect, not with fear, but with a cold, steady mistrust. Parents pulled their children closer. Neighbors lowered their voices until she passed, then spoke louder once she was gone. Karen had wanted power. She had wanted obedience, control, and glory. Instead, she got isolation. She got ridicule. She got regret that clung to her heavier than her clipboard ever had. As she closed her door behind her that night, the neighborhood outside felt different, lighter, freer, almost relieved. For the first time in weeks, people laughed together on porches. Dogs barked without fear of fines. Children's toys sat proudly in the yards. The street lived again, and Karen, standing alone in the silence of her house, realized the bitter truth. She had tried to own the neighborhood, but it was the neighborhood, or that had claimed victory. Her name would no longer inspire fear, only mistrust, only pity, only regret. The end of Karen's reign had come, and it ended not with power, but with shame.